Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nothing But Locks podcast. I'm your host, Allie Melnick, accompanied by Jacob Schrader. How are you doing today, Jacob?
I'm doing okay. It's a tough season as a Rams fan. But I don't know. I've had fun watching the NFL nonetheless. It's been more of a fantasy focus for me, but you know, enjoying it because you only get the NFL season about a third of the year, so it's fun while you're in it.
Very, very true. And Jacob and I have a special Thanksgiving episode for you guys today. Instead of doing our usual start and sit, we're basically going to recap the year, give our top surprises, position by position, disappointments, where we went wrong. Maybe we're too high in a player and they just played like garbage this year. But we have a few other segments, so this should be a fun episode. All right. Well, let's get started, Jacob, with the top surprises and disappointments part of this. So we're going to focus on quarterbacks, obviously, because that's the number one position that I feel like frustrates me more than anything. If you don't get your quarterback situation right, chances are the rest of the season, you're pretty much toast because obviously no one's going to drop a Josh Allen or a Jalen Hurts or Pat Mahomes. So if you get those mid-tier guys and they don't pan out for you, you're pretty much screwed. So first of all, let's start with the quarterback surprises. These are the guys that no one drafted, or maybe a few people drafted, but in the late rounds, but they really have come out and they've really been a star this year. And my top three surprises are obviously Justin Fields. He's just exploded the last few weeks. Geno Smith, who no one even thought he would still be the starter by this time at the beginning of the season. And Daniel Jones, who many doubted if he would be the starter still for the Giants, and he ranks in the top 10 as well in fantasy quarterbacks to start the season. So, based on my three, Jacob, how about you? What are your top three quarterback surprises this year?
Yeah, I mean, yours are all great picks. I do remember thinking before the year, I wasn't on the Seahawks hype train. I wasn't going out and saying I think the Seahawks will be good, but I always in the back of my head was like, Geno Smith was not that bad, and then they have those crazy wide receivers. So to some degree, I'm just happy for Geno. He had such a tough time in New York, but he's really revitalized his career. And obviously Justin Fields has just been kind of a cannon shot out of nowhere. But my three biggest surprises were Tua from Miami, Joe Burrow to some degree, and then Marcus Mariota. Tua, I guess, I didn't see enough from him last year to warrant just the success he's having this year. I think, he's played so well with Tyreek Hill. I think Tyreek Hill is pretty close to being on pace with the all-time receiving yardage record. I actually think he's on pace to break it, but he has an extra game over Calvin.
Mm-hmm.
Tua's just been lights out. He has such good chemistry with McDaniels. I see awesome Instagram clips. I mean, McDaniels has got to be my favorite coach at this point. I mean, he's funny in press conferences. He's literally, in a sense, making jokes with Tua on the bench. He asked him, "Do you want to go left or right?" And Tua said, "I want you to choose." And it was all in such a stress-free manner. It shows the level of confidence they have in each other, and that's powerful. Tua's been dominant this year. I mean, the Miami Dolphins are almost Super Bowl contenders, right? They're pretty close. So that's a surprise to me. Lefties, I don't expect to do well, but he's doing great.
Yep.
Joe Burrow, I just think, even after Jamar Chase went down, he's been lights out. I mean, he has been so good. I think he was drafted reasonably high, but he wasn't drafted in the top three of quarterbacks, where he is this year. He's kind of picked it up as of late. He started slow, but he started slow last year. I've been surprised that Joe Burrow has been as good as he is. And then Mariota. Mariota is another guy I like, and he's been good. He's 13th ranked quarterback right now in my league. That's certainly a surprise. I did not see Mariota being as good as he was.
Yeah, Mariota actually is a good surprise too, because I thought for sure the Falcons would be tanking this year. They did draft Desmond Ridder in the second round in the NFL draft last year, so you presume that he was already going to be the starter by then. But they're right in the thick of the race in the NFC South. I believe they're only one game behind Tampa Bay, and they're very much alive to win that division. So Marcus Mariota, I've always been a fan of him going back to his Oregon days, so it's nice to see him enjoy a little success. I do think the Titans might have moved off of him quicker than they probably should have. I don't think there's any reason he can't be doing in Tennessee right now what Ryan Tannehill's doing. Probably maybe even better because he's more mobile than Tannehill. But I definitely agree with all of those. I was not a fan of Tua entering the season. He's just totally surpassed my expectations. He's inserted himself into the MVP race, which is insane.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's right up there with Pat Mahomes, probably number one and two, one A, I would say, to who's leading the MVP. I know he does have some great receivers with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, but give credit where credit is due for sure.
Oh yeah.
Now let's move on to the disappointments. So my top three quarterback disappointments this year are Russell Wilson, Tom Brady, and Baker Mayfield. I'll highlight Baker Mayfield real quick because I was so high on him when he got traded to the Panthers. I thought him going to a team that had DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson as your top two receivers, Christian McCaffrey in the backfield, I should say. That is the recipe for success. And they were already playing in a weak NFC South. I just mentioned how Atlanta's only one game out. No one expected Tampa Bay to be as bad as they are, but this division was prime for the taking. If Baker Mayfield showed what he did in 2020, this team could easily be in first place right now. Instead, he's one of the prime reasons that his head coach got fired. Christian McCaffrey got traded. Robbie Anderson's no longer on the team either. DJ Moore just sighs every time Baker Mayfield has to come in the line because he has more connection with PJ Walker, and fantasy owners as well of DJ Moore. I feel the same way. I don't understand where Baker Mayfield just fell off. He started again this past Sunday against the Ravens. He looked awful.
Oh yeah. Real
He had
bad.
2 or 3 interceptions, no touchdowns. He couldn't generate any offense with them. The guy is no longer a viable starter in the NFL. It's sad to see because I was high on Baker Mayfield coming out of Oklahoma. I know a lot of people doubted him. They said he had a bad attitude. He had behavioral issues. He got arrested when he was in college for being excessively drunk or vandalizing, something like that. But I thought he really would take a mature step in the NFL. He really didn't. He's just alienated a ton of players, including in the Browns when he played with Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry. So Baker Mayfield, he's my number one disappointment, along with Russell Wilson and Tom Brady this year. How about you, Jacob?
Yeah, Baker's been tough. I thought he was like Manziel 2.0, but took it a little more seriously. Maybe he does, but it's not looking good. I don't know if he's had a shoulder injury, but he doesn't have zip on the ball. But moving on to my disappointments, I'm saying Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford, and Derek Carr. And I guess I'll highlight Stafford because he's my guy. I have started every single fantasy football game I've ever played with Matthew Stafford as my quarterback. So this season has hurt me quite a bit, the fact that he's been as bad as he has. And I think it's a multitude of reasons, but it's really the offensive line. I mean, Stafford's a good quarterback. He may not be an elite quarterback, but I mean, he's pretty close. And last year, everyone was saying that he was because there were, a better offensive line protecting him and he had better receivers. I think this falls on the offensive line. I think it falls on Allen Robinson. They did not need to sign him. They did not need to let their hometown guy Robert Woods go to sign Allen Robinson to $15 million a year. I mean, get someone on defense. I mean, it's unbelievable. Stafford looked unbelievably good against the Saints last week until he got hurt. Throwing 60-yard strikes to Tutu Atwell. I mean, who even is that?
Yeah.
But the offensive line has hurt him. He's first in the league in touchdown passes of 60+ yards. They've got stuff going, but it's just he's been under so much pressure. And they've got the Super Bowl hangover. So Stafford has been a major disappointment.
Yeah, it's funny because a few weeks ago we would have been talking. Let's look at the quarterback draft class from 2021 because there was 5 quarterbacks taken in that first round. You had Mac Jones, you had Trey Lance, you had Trevor Lawrence, you had Zach Wilson and Justin Fields. The fact that Justin Fields is the lead is by far blowing everyone away in fantasy points is ridiculous to me. Everyone was high on Trevor Lawrence coming into the season. They thought he would be a fantasy star. He's nowhere near that. Mac Jones, I doubt, and same thing with Zach Wilson. I doubt they're even on anyone's radar. So it just goes to show you that just because a quarterback draft in the actual NFL draft, not fantasy draft, just because it's labeled as a strong draft doesn't mean these guys are stars. I know the jury's still out. Trey Lance hasn't played. He got hurt in the second game of the year. But I mean, this, and even though Justin Fields is performing on a fantasy level, he still can't throw the ball. He's still for like 153 yards, I believe, 14 for 21 with an interception on Sunday. So it was a disappointing draft class.
Yeah, I'll say Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson are, to me, very similar in just their composure and leadership. They basically both scream the same thing to me. They don't take accountability. You see them, they're I'm going to use this word, but they're kind of the first class of Gen Z quarterbacks in my eyes. They're all about flash, right? Trevor Lawrence is talking about playing with swag. Zach Wilson is, I mean, yeah, yesterday it was all over social media. Zach Wilson was asked, you scored 3 points, you had 2 yards of offense in the second half. Do you feel like you let your defense down? And he immediately said no. I mean, that was the most cringe and just unaccountability I've ever seen from an NFL quarterback. I mean, I grew up in Connecticut, and that's the worst, most trust fund baby attitude I have ever seen. And that's coming from an NFL quarterback. I mean, that was unbelievable. It was laughable. If Zach Wilson starts next week, I will be so surprised. I mean, the Jets are a good team. The Jets have a chance to make the playoffs. You cannot start a 12-year-old at quarterback. I mean, it's sad to me. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. That press conference was totally just your stereotypical entitled brat that basically nothing's my fault, but yeah, it's Zach Wilson. Everything is your fault. This team was rolling on offense when they had rookie Breece Hall at running back. They were even winning when Joe Flacco, the old guy, was taking over. You are terrible. There is not one game that can be contributed because Zach Wilson played good. He's not the reason for any of their wins. He's the reason for all their, well, I shouldn't say all because Joe Flacco started a few games. He's the reason for the majority of their losses, though. Zach Wilson should be on the bench.
Joe Flacco was a top 3 statistical quarterback when they benched him. I mean, I understand he was your first round pick recently, but you're playing to win this year. I mean, you've got an actual shot. You have an unbelievable defense. You're not messing around with it's kind of, to me, it's the same situation as Trey Lance versus Jimmy G. I mean, the 49ers are the best team in the NFL on paper if you just take out the quarterback position. And it's not even close, right? If you take out the quarterback position, the 49ers are the best team. And you can't have a rookie quarterback who's going to make rookie quarterback mistakes. You need a vet. Jimmy G is a B plus quarterback, and that is exactly what you need. I mean, he threw 4 touchdowns last night. He is perfect for the 49ers. And, someone like Flacco, who's old and experienced, is the same for the Jets.
It's interesting because when I was watching the broadcast last night and they were talking about Jimmy G, they said the Cardinals' game plan was to take away the run and force Jimmy G to throw. I don't know why Jimmy G gets this bad complex that he can't throw, because they did force Jimmy G to throw, and he was brilliant last night.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned 4 touchdowns. He was hitting guys on slants. His connection with George Kittle for those 2 touchdowns was remarkable. Those were both great passes. He probably should have had another few completions, but his receivers dropped the ball. Jimmy G is a legit quarterback in this game. And just because he's not utilized like, say, a Tua this year or like Aaron Rodgers in years past doesn't mean he's still not talented. He's beaten Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs every time he's faced Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs. So I don't want to hear this criticism of Jimmy G. Right now, if you ask me which NFC team is going to be in the Super Bowl, I will tell you it will be the San Francisco 49ers. I will take them over the Dallas Cowboys. I will take them over the Philadelphia Eagles. I will take them over the Minnesota Vikings. Even the Seattle Seahawks. I think the 49ers are the best team in the NFC right now. And Jimmy G is maybe not the absolute reason that they are, but he's one of the reasons. If Trey Lance is quarterback right now, this team doesn't have a 500 record, even with Christian McCaffrey. So San Francisco, stop hating on Jimmy G. The guy's going to take you to a Super Bowl. He's already done it. He probably will get you a win this year. So stop complaining.
Yeah, I told my dad, I said 49ers are going to win the Super Bowl. He said they're 5-4. I was like, just wait. It's an unbelievably sound football team. I actually said this, when Jimmy G played Aaron Rodgers, it must have been 4 years ago. or 3 years ago in the NFC Championship. I said this is going to be a blowout. The 49ers are good on offense and they are good on defense, and that is a winning combo. The Packers were horrible on defense that year. And guess what? The Chiefs, who are most likely going to be their opponent in the Super Bowl, are the same way. I see the San Francisco 49ers as the Super Bowl favorite at this point.
Totally agree. All right, let's move on to the running backs. Let's start with the surprises of the year. So my top three running back surprises are Dameon Pierce, Jamal Williams, and Tony Pollard. I'll highlight Tony Pollard because people mostly drafted him if they had Ezekiel Elliott and they felt like they had to handcuff Pollard because Zeke can get injured from time to time. I don't think anyone expected Tony Pollard to come out and be the number one guy at this time of the season. Ezekiel Elliott is no longer the number one guy on that team. He's back from injury, but Tony Pollard is the guy to go to. He was just amazing this past weekend against the Vikings. And that's not just the first game that he's been awesome all year. You watched him in the past few games with Zeke out. The guy's a number one running back, and he's a top 10 running back once he gets the full-time role when it comes to fantasy football. Heck, he might even get all the way up to top 5 running back because he can catch, something that you don't see a guy like Derrick Henry do. Jonathan Taylor doesn't even get as many catches as you would presume. The guy's just a beast. So Tony Pollard, he's my biggest surprise, and I think he's going to be at least a top 5 running back in the drafts for the next year or two. What do you think?
Yeah. It's interesting because Zeke is good. But he's good at, I think they complement each other very well.
That's true.
Right? Zeke is the AJ Dillon to Tony Pollard's Aaron Jones to a degree. And you can't have two good quarterbacks. You can have two good running backs, though. So I would be a little bit worried if they re-sign Zeke. And I think it's a real possibility. But my three,
Tony Pollard is the 8th highest fantasy scoring running back this season. 8th.
Yeah.
Like he's above Aaron Jones. He's above Dalvin Cook. He's above Joe Mixon, Leonard Fournette. Like no one could have predicted that.
Yeah. He's good. I agree with that. My 3 biggest surprises were Breece Hall, Rachaad White, and Aaron Jones. And I'm going to highlight Rachaad White because if you're a Leonard Fournette owner, you're terrified right now because in the last game, the Bucs played, Rachaad White out-carried Leonard Fournette, and it's been kind of a progressive thing where Rachaad White has taken a lot of time away from Fournette, like a lot of time. And it started in the running game and it's moving to really the entire field. He's playing on third downs now. He's catching passes. Rachaad White is good and Brady trusts him, and he's a smaller back who's a little shiftier. I've been really surprised by how good he's been and the fact that he may take over to some degree next year. He may take over for the rest of the season as the lead back. I think there's a lot to like about Rachaad White moving forward in his career, especially if he's on the Bucs with Tom Brady.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think, like you said, we've seen Leonard Fournette kind of take a step back this year. Leonard Fournette's never going to command a high salary at this point in his career. He's getting up there in age, and he has a past injury proneness to him. So I think Rachaad White is a good running back to focus on if you're the Bucs, especially if Brady retires this year. Then this team is going to get absolutely blown up. It's good to have a franchise running back at least, and White should be that guy. All right, let's move on to the biggest running back disappointments. So I'll name my top 3, and I'm going to put Ezekiel Elliott, Najee Harris, and Melvin Gordon. I'll pinpoint Najee Harris because I was so high on him to start the year. I thought that his breakout toward the end of the 2021 campaign would carry on to this year. I thought he would have a lot more carries because of the Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett situation, that they would rely more on the run game. But the guy has just been non-existent, and Warren is kind of giving him a run for his money as the lead back in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's always been known to have good running backs. Le'Veon Bell, when James Conner took over, and he was a number 1 back in there for a few years, and he still kind of is in Arizona when he is healthy. I am surprised that Najee Harris has just been in the slump that he is. He's not even ranked, I believe, in the top 30. If I went and looked it up now, I don't have it at the top of my head. But Najee, oh yeah, I could look it up now. So he's the 22nd ranked running back to start the season. That's not good considering how high he's been drafted. He was getting drafted as high as in the first round in some drafts. No, and definitely he was getting drafted in the second round. So the fact that he ranks only 22nd in the league for fantasy running backs is just preposterous. He has guys above him like Jeff Wilson, Khalil Herbert, who weren't even starting running backs to start the year. It's crazy how just Najee Harris has fallen. I totally whiffed on him. I really had a lot of faith in him. I know that a lot of people could probably even put Jonathan Taylor up here as being disappointing, but Jonathan Taylor did miss a few games with injury. So, and he has been good as of late. So I don't want to pinpoint that, but those three are my big disappointments of the season. How about you, Jacob?
Yeah, my three disappointments. I had Najee on here as well. Then I had Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Elijah Mitchell. The latter two, I actually drafted both of them, so it's been tough. But Clyde specifically, I've just been a little confused as to why they've used him so little in recent weeks. I mean, he's basically gone from a guy who was scoring 2 touchdowns every other weekend to a guy who doesn't even see the field now. And he was really efficient, and they drafted him in the second round a few years ago. It's just just surprising that they basically delegated him to the bench so quickly, and he's not been that bad. He's always kind of been involved in their offense, and I expected him to pick it up this year. Be the lead back. I thought he would see more carries and more receptions because Tyreek got traded, but he's basically he's droppable at this point, 100%.
Yeah, I don't even think he plays for the. I don't think he even starts for them. He didn't have one touch this past week.
It's crazy. I mean, he was like the most efficient running back in the NFL through 3 weeks, and then just doesn't see the ball. And Isaiah Pacheco is now their lead back, and they've got McKinnon who's seeing carries and reception. So I mean, that's a major bust. He was drafted about 45th in fantasy drafts, and he's droppable at this point.
Yeah, definitely agree with all those as well. Elijah Mitchell, I know he's been hurt, but he's definitely going to be a disappointment because people drafted him to be a number one guy, and Christian McCaffrey is there now. Though Elijah Mitchell did have a decent game last night, but a lot of that was garbage time yardage. All right, let's move on to wide receivers. So my top three wide receiver surprises are Chris Olave, Christian Kirk, and Gabe Davis. I was gonna highlight Chris Olave, but if people listen to this podcast, they know how high I was on him. I was higher than most people in the off season, so I'm not gonna highlight him. But Christian Kirk, I didn't realize until I was looking up stats, as I usually do after a fantasy football weekend. But Christian Kirk is the ninth best fantasy football wide receiver this year. I didn't realize that. And that's maybe because I just don't care about the Jaguars and I don't focus on their stats. But I didn't realize that Christian Kirk even ranks higher than CeeDee Lamb. I know Jamar Chase has missed a few games, but he ranks higher than him. He ranks higher than Chris Olave, T. Higgins, who was getting drafted really high, Debo Samuel, Amon Ra. Like he's actually one of the most consistent guys if you look at a wide receiver to rely on in fantasy. So Christian Kirk, props to you. I did not see that coming. What do you think, Jacob?
Yeah, he's been real good. Last 3 weeks he's actually been excellent. But my three surprises were DeAndre Hopkins, Tyreek Hill, and then the Seahawks wide receiver duo of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. I guess I'll highlight Tyreek Hill because I think he was drafted around the 20, 26, 28 range, but he's the wide receiver one right now. I mean, he is so far ahead of the pack. I mean, he is dominating with Tua. He is, he's kind of it's taken a little bit of a different role with the Dolphins. He's not the deep guy. He's the possession guy. I mean, he averages like 11 yards per catch, and then his counter his partner Jalen Waddle is averaging like 17 yards. I mean, Jalen Waddle is a surprise too, but Tyreek Hill, I think people didn't think he was going to have the same year. I think Mahomes is obviously so good, but he's dominating in Miami. He's having a better year than he may have had with the Chiefs, and that is definitely a surprise.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Tyreek Hill, a lot of people question how he was going to perform out of Kansas City. He should have been right up there with the top three of Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, and Jamar Chase for the top three wide receivers that was getting drafted because he's just been phenomenal. He's just loaded with talent. He's so fast. He ranks fourth among wide receivers in fantasy this year. Only Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, and Justin Jefferson rank above him. So definitely give props to Tyreek Hill. Let's move on then to the other end, and that's the disappointment. So Allen Robinson, Jerry Jeudy, and Drake London are my three disappointments. I'm going to highlight Allen Robinson because I fell into the Allen Robinson hype as well. I believe I drafted him, I want to say in the fourth round, maybe fifth round, something like that. But I had a lot of better options I could have taken. I could have taken like an Amon Ra. I took Allen Robinson over him. It was just crazy how he just hasn't produced. I thought going over to the Rams, he would basically be Cooper Kupp's 1A. He's not even in the top 5 for the Rams when it comes to receiving. Like you said, Matt Stafford's throwing to Tutu Atwell, 62 yards over him with Cooper Kupp out. I know Allen Robinson did manage to get a touchdown against the Saints, but the guy just has been a total letdown all year. I don't want to put the blame all on Allen Robinson because a lot of it at the beginning of the season was he was just not getting targeted. But when it comes to fantasy disappointment, Allen Robinson, you are number one for me.
Yeah.
How about you, Jacob?
My three are Darnell Mooney, Debo Samuel, and DJ Moore. I guess I'll highlight Debo. I was never going to draft Debo this year. I had him last year actually, and obviously was happy to have him. But he was drafted, about 18th overall this year, and it was clear at the end of last season in the playoffs that Brandon Ayuk was really really good, and Kittle is good, and they've got a strong run game. There's just too many mouths to feed in San Francisco for Debo to produce every game. I do think in terms of raw ability, Debo is an unbelievable player. I mean, that dude is basically indestructible. I mean, he is so much heavier than people think he is because of how fast he is. But the Rams cornerback Jalen Ramsey is one of the best tacklers in the NFL, and he is basically over when trying to tackle Debo Samuel. He just can't do it. I mean, Debo Samuel is too strong on his feet and too fast to be tackled. He's good, but there's just too many mouths to feed in San Francisco, and C-Mac just takes even more touches away from Debo.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm like you. I wasn't high on Debo at all. He just seemed one of those guys where last season everything went right for him. No one really knew him. He broke out. I actually thought that Amon Ra would have a fantastic season. I know people thought maybe his breakout would get cut short, but Debo definitely, he was getting drafted in some leagues in the first round, which was preposterous, I thought. But he was definitely always going in at least the second round. So Debo has definitely been a disappointment. I know he's missed a game or two with injury, but still, even when he plays, he's no longer their number one option. All right, let's go to tight ends. So my three surprises are Zach Ertz, Cole Kmet, and Jawan Johnson. And I'll highlight Cole Kmet because after the first 2 weeks of the season, he was persona non grata on the show because in my defense, he got 0 points in each of the first 2 weeks. Now, this is when Justin Fields was just pretty much throwing air balls up in the air and hoping someone could catch him. But since Justin Fields has been utilizing his legs more, he's a dual threat. So people are guarding him against the run. That brings the front seven to look at Justin Fields as a runner. It has opened up Cole Kmet, and Cole Kmet has just been wide open on various occasions. It's allowed him to get numerous touchdowns and long touchdowns as well. So I think Cole Kmet can thank Justin Fields that Justin Fields decided to start using his legs, because now Cole Kmet is out of the doghouse and he's actually the most surprising tight end of the year for me. How about you, Jacob?
Yeah, Cole Kmet has really picked it up. My three surprises are David Njoku, Hayden Hurst, and Pat Fryermuth. I'm going to highlight Hayden Hurst, although Njoku, I think we talked about and said, this guy may do something this year because of the money they gave him. He's been spectacular when he's played. But Hayden Hurst has been a real surprise. I mean, he was undrafted in most leagues, and he's a consistent option for Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. He had a down week last week, but I mean, he's seeing like 4 to 6 receptions each week. He's scoring some touchdowns, and I think he'll see more throughout the second half of the season with Jamar hurt for who knows how long. But I mean, he's just been a consistent tight end, and that's hard to find. Really surprised by him. He looks good. He's kind of an undersized and good catching tight end, but he's really been good. He's getting targets. He's getting good looks. I'm surprised Hayden Hurst is a viable tight end this year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I did not think Hayden Hurst. I actually thought that the Bengals did themselves a disservice when they allowed Uzuma to go off to the Jets. I thought he really came along at the end of the season, but Hayden Hurst has filled in admirably for him. Let's move on to the disappointments when it comes to tight ends. And my three disappointments are Kyle Pitts, Dawson Knox, and Tyler Higbee. And I'll highlight Kyle Pitts. I was never a Kyle Pitts fan. The fact that at the beginning of the season, people were putting Kyle Pitts in the top three, along with Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce, was just preposterous. Like, I have no idea why anyone thought that this guy was going to be a top tight end, like on the Mark Andrews and the Kelce level. He doesn't have a quarterback that throws a lot. We mentioned Marcus Mariota is a nice surprise for fantasy, but that's because of his legs. It's not because of his throwing. Drake London will tell you that, who is also one of my disappointments for wide receivers. Kyle Pitts should be a top guy. I almost put George Kittle here, but then George Kittle had a fantastic game last night. And every now and then George Kittle will have a breakout game. I don't think Kyle Pitts has had one breakout game this entire season. And he won't, because unfortunately he did just get injured this past week and his season is over. But when it comes to fantasy, and the fact that he was going as the number 3 tight end is just ridiculous. So Kyle Pitts, number 1 fantasy disappointment for me. How about you, Jacob?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Mike Gesicki of Miami, Noah Fant, and then George Kittle. I mean, Kittle did have a great game last week, but I think it's the injuries for me, and then just the lack of or the multitude of options in San Francisco. Right, same thing as Debo. Kittle could put up 2 points in any week, and the 49ers could still win and score 30 points. Right, there's just so many mouths to feed. And Kittle was a guy who was kind of drafted around the tight end 4, tight end 5 slot, and he's not performing at that level this year.
Yeah, definitely. I know Kittle is a disappointment just because because he is good when he catches the ball. Like, that's the sad part, is he is talented, but depending on the game plan, sometimes they'll exclusively use him for blocking. So I can't say it's his fault. That's why I didn't necessarily put him in there. But yeah, definitely can see that as well. All right. Well, now that we've recapped all the surprises and disappointments from the major positions, let's play the newest segment we had. We introduced it last week. It was a nice little addition to this podcast. And that is a segment we like to call Start, Bench, and Cut. So it's my turn this week, and I'm going to give Jacob 3 players on the same position. He has to decide for the rest of the season which one he's going to start, which one he's going to bench, and which one he's going to cut. So, Jacob, are you ready?
Oh, yeah.
All right, let's start with the quarterback situation. Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, and Aaron Rodgers. Who would you start? Who would you bench? And who would you cut?
Yeah, so I think Herbert is my starter. Herbert is going to be potentially going to be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I think this guy is on another level, just in terms of arm talent. I mean, the throws he makes backing up and just basically shot putting the ball 40 yards down the field and being accurate with it. He's unbelievable. He's had a lot of injuries with his receivers, but we saw they were back on Sunday Night Football and he performed really well. I think he's kind of a top 5 QB for the rest of the year. He was certainly drafted as such. So he's my starter. I think I'm going to bench Aaron Rodgers just because of the talent, right? He's so much better than Goff. Christian Watson is coming alive a little bit. Aaron Jones catches the ball and then runs in for touchdowns every once in a while. I think the Packers are coming alive a little bit. They certainly did so against the Cowboys. So I mean, he's going on my bench. And then Goff, I thought Goff was real good at the start of the season, but he's come back down to earth. I mean, the Lions are winning, but it's scored a lot of rushing touchdowns last week. I mean, Goff's not bad. I just don't think he's on the level of talent as those other two. So I'm dropping him.
Yeah, that's good. I would probably do the same. All right, let's move to the running back situation. And I decided to focus on the top 3 running backs that were going at the beginning of the season. So, Jacob, start, bench, or cut out of these 3. Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, and Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, so this is tough between McCaffrey and Henry. I think I'm going to start Henry because the Tennessee offense runs through Henry. He's seeing a more receptions, and their game plan is to get Derrick Henry the ball and to basically run people over. Derrick Henry is now back to being the number 1 running back, at least in my league. C-Mac is good. He's great, but he's just not getting enough touches in San Francisco to warrant being the best running back in the league, right? I understand he's going to be incredibly efficient. I understand he's going to get some touchdowns, but he's not going to see the usage because of all the other threats they have. And I guess I'm cutting Jonathan Taylor, right? He's been a pretty big disappointment this year. I mean, he had a pretty good game last weekend. But I mean, we said this at the start of the year, right? You're drafting Jonathan Taylor at his absolute peak.
Right.
I mean, the Colts are not the same team this year as they were last year. They're not running the ball as much. They have Matt Ryan, who they're throwing it more. They're throwing it to Pittman. They've got some good receivers. He's just not the same. He's not in the same position as he was last year. So I'm going to drop him.
Yeah, I would probably switch up C-Mac and Derrick Henry just because I love C-Mac's versatility. He can catch the ball. He can even throw the ball for a touchdown.
Yeah.
So I would switch those up. Let's move on to wide receiver. Jacob, start, bench, or cut. Stephon Diggs, Justin Jefferson, and CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah. So this is a tough one. I mean, CeeDee Lamb is an absolute beast. And I know that the Cowboys are thinking about signing Odell, so that might hurt him a little bit. Anyways, I do think he is my drop here. I mean, you're having him slated against the top two wide receivers, or two of the top three. I think Tyreek's in there as well. But I think I'm going to start Justin Jefferson here. I think I'm going to bench Stephon Diggs. And, that's a really tough decision because they're both so good. But Justin Jefferson runs that offense. Stephon Diggs is obviously a huge part of what they do in Buffalo. I just think Justin Jefferson's a little bit better. I think he has less weapons around him to a degree. But it's a tough decision. That's kind of a toss-up to me, to be honest, between Stephon Diggs and Justin Jefferson. But I'm going to start Jefferson, and I'm going to bench Diggs.
I'm always partial to Diggs. I've liked Diggs since he was in Minnesota. And we talked about this many times on the podcast. If someone's your guy, you go with your guy. Stephon Diggs is my guy. So I would always go with him, even over Justin Jefferson. I don't think you really could argue between the two. They both are just explosive. But just because Stephon Diggs has always been my guy, I would start him. All right, last position, Jacob, tight end. Who would you start, bench, and cut between TJ Hockenson, Mark Andrews, and George Kittle?
Yeah. So I love Hockenson, right? Hockenson is my guy. I loved him when Stafford was in Detroit. He's an unbelievable talent. He carries himself incredibly well. He is tough. He is fast. He catches. I mean, he is an elite tight end. And you're seeing that in Minnesota. I mean, he has put up 3 very good weeks back to back to back. And by this point, he probably knows the offense. And if the Vikings did anything last week, Hockenson was going to get a touchdown and he would have had an unbelievable week yet again. You can call me crazy, but I'm going to start TJ Hockenson here. I believe in TJ Hawkinson's talent. Kirk Cousins is okay as long as we're not playing in prime time. And I know Justin Jefferson is unbelievable. Those are their 2 options on the offense, right? They're running the ball with Cook and they're throwing to these 2 guys.
Yeah,
I think Hockenson puts up crazy numbers for the rest of the season. I really do. Then I'm going to bench Mark Andrews because Kittle just, there's too many threats in San Francisco. Kittle's good, or Andrews is good, though. Andrews has been unbelievable this year. I mean, I'm just a Hockenson truther, so I'm taking a risk on him.
Yeah, can't argue with that. I never disagree about people when they take their guys. So let's move on to the next segment. And Jacob and I, we have 3 great Thanksgiving Day games. I know a lot of people will not only bet on the games, but they will play some daily fantasy that's just based on the 3 Thanksgiving games. We got the morning game, morning on the Pacific Coast, which will be the Bills and the Lions. Then we have the Giants and the Cowboys, followed by the Vikings and Patriots. So 3 really good games, a lot of them with playoff implications. So, Jacob, we're going to pick who we think is going to be the top scorer on Thanksgiving Day for each position. So I'll go first, and we'll start with the quarterback. I think Josh Allen's going to be the top Thanksgiving Day scorer for the quarterback. He's going against the Lions, who still, even though they've been doing a little better lately, they still have a really bad defense, particularly in the secondary. The Giants weren't able to take advantage of that because not only do the Giants have 0 receivers, but it was very windy in New York last week. And I should say New Jersey. They do play New Jersey. That it was very windy there. So I think that playing in the Dome when they're going to be in Detroit, I think Josh Allen is back. I think he had a good game last week against the Browns that proved a lot of his doubters wrong. I think he's just going to explode against them. I think he wants that turkey leg. He got it last year, I think the year before, one of those. So I think Josh Allen's going to be the top quarterback on Thanksgiving. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, Josh Allen's a solid pick. The over under for this game is 54, which is about as high as it gets in the NFL. I mean, you have the Lions who are going to score points and going to give up points. You know that for sure. I'm going with Dak Prescott. I know the Giants have a pretty good defense. They did get exposed a little bit
Yep.
last week against the Lions. I mean, I think we talked about that. That was a real potential upset for them, and it happened. Dak is back. He's healthy. He's got a running back in TJ, and Tony Pollard now, who is going to catch passes and boost his stats, maybe a receiving touchdown. He's got CeeDee Lamb. He's got Dalton Schultz. I mean, the Cowboys, when they go off like no other team. I mean, the Cowboys in the last 2 or 3 seasons have put up 40 or plus points more than anybody. I mean, I don't have the stats on it, but last year it was unbelievable how many times they basically blew teams out of the water. And it could be another one of those games. And if it is, Dak could have 4, maybe even 5 touchdowns. It's really a possibility that Dak just goes crazy on Thanksgiving.
God, I hope not. I'm a New York Giants fan, so maybe some of my picks might have been a little biased, but no, not really. All right, let's move on to the running back. And I think Saquon Barkley is going to be the top running back this week. He had a terrible game last week. He only ran for 22 yards on 15 carries. It was just tough to get any offense generated in that game. I always love in fantasy backing guys that are stars and had bad previous weeks. I do it all the time with Davante Adams. If he had a bad week, I know he's just going to go off next week. I think this is the case for Saquon Barkley. He had a terrible game last week. I think he's just going to run all over the Dallas defense. Dallas does have a very good defense, but we saw a few weeks ago when Dallas played Green Bay that Aaron Jones was able to totally run all over them. I know that was mostly a Christian Watson game, but still they can be vulnerable to the run sometimes. I think Saquon does have a breakout game this week. How about you, Jacob?
Yeah, I'm going with a surprise pick here. I'm going with Damian Harris.
Oh, that is a surprise.
Rhamondre was, I saw articles saying, this guy is the clear-cut starter in New England, and now after last week, Harris, averaged about 8 yards per carry, and Rhamondre didn't do much at all. Minnesota's not good against the run. They're ranked 20th. It's definitely a place where they got exposed. They got exposed last week for sure. And Damian Harris can break a game open. He can really run the ball, and the Pats are going to be running the ball a ton this game. If Damian Harris runs 18 times, he could see 100 plus yards, and he could see 2 touchdowns in this game. And that could put him as the leading running back. I think it's a sneaky pick, but I think it's a good one.
No, that is a good pick. Sometimes how you win your daily fantasy league is when you take guys that no one usually gets, because everyone could predict the usual names to have good weeks. And I would say more times than not, sometimes those guys that you think is going to have good games don't. And you always get the guys that people just overlook. They're very cheap when it comes to daily fantasy. And that's a guy like Damian Harris. So maybe if you spend money on other positions, maybe you want a Justin Jefferson or Stephon Diggs for wide receiver, Damian Harris will come cheap at running back. So he's a good guy to complement you. All right, let's move on to wide receiver. So I'm going to be totally unoriginal here. And I think Justin Jefferson is going to be the number 1 running wide receiver this weekend. I mentioned before how I love guys bouncing back. Justin Jefferson did not have a good game last week against the Cowboys. I believe he only had 3 catches for 33 yards. I think he's going to explode against the Patriots this week. He's definitely going to bounce back. He's going to get a lot more targets than just the 5 that he got this past Sunday. I think Kirk Cousins will also bounce back and have a good game. I know it's in prime time, but it is Thanksgiving. Guys tend to show up on Thanksgiving. So I'm going to go with Justin Jefferson here. How about you, Jacob?
Yeah, I'm kind of making a surprise pick here. I think the obvious answer is Stephon Diggs. But I think CeeDee Lamb may show up big time. I already said Dak is going to have a big week, and I think it's going to go to CeeDee Lamb. The Giants are pretty good on D, but they may not be a match for Dak and the Cowboys passing offense. CeeDee Lamb is an unbelievable player. In terms of raw ability, just such good body control. It's a little crazy. And, he could go wild. He could catch deep passes. He can catch touchdowns. I think it's a solid week for him on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's a good pick. Again, I hate for it to happen because I am a New York Giants fan, but definitely could totally see that if Dak has a good game, that usually means CeeDee Lamb has a good game. All right, well, everyone, I want to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. I know I am looking forward to just relaxing, having a nice glass of wine, watching some football, eating some good food. I am vegetarian, so I can't be saying I will be eating turkey, but I will be eating every side dish. And I love the side dishes. I love all the mashed potatoes. I love everything that you got to give me as a side to eat. And I feel like I get to eat more because I don't get full on turkey. Well, before we head out, Jacob, any last words of advice or thoughts you'd like to share with the audience?
I guess I'll reiterate, have a happy Thanksgiving. Don't forget to set your DFS lineups the night before because those games start early if you're on Pacific time. And yeah, hope everyone's doing well. Hope you're enjoying the football season, and we'll see you next week.
All right, everyone, take care.